Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and joining me from East Texas, Tyler, Texas, is Paul Haygood. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee. I'm glad to be here. I'm stoked that this is happening.
Man, guys, you're in for a treat. Paul Haygood is, like I said, from Tyler, Texas, preacher's kid, raised Southern Baptist, and eventually landed himself studying philosophy in Switzerland. He's lived all over the United States, particularly the Western Coast, and has since returned to Texas. And I'm going to let him expand on his story, his faith journey, because Paul, wow, with such a rich history, lots of academia, lots of travel and conversations. Talk to me about being raised by a preacher, Southern Baptist, and where you are now.
Yes. Well, it's taken me a while to get to the academia piece. I gave this a go at Texas A&M back in the 90s, a first attempt, and I'm grateful now to be finally finishing, fingers crossed, in December, an undergraduate degree in social sciences and double major with also music being the other one. So it's been a long and circuitous road to this place and this moment. I swore growing up in Tyler that I would never, ever move back for a variety of reasons. And remind me, you've been to Tyler once or twice?
Yeah, so I went to Pine Cove a few
Yes.
summers. Yeah.
Yeah, we may have been there around the same times. It's possible. I went to Pine Cove many summers and then worked there 4 separate summers in the 90s. So in any case, Tyler, Texas is an incredibly unique place from a number of regards, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But let me just as a teaser, look at this flyer that I saw recently. Check this out. Worship karaoke.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's probably
okay.
showing up reversed there as the robots do. But in any case, it's just one small example of a sort of subculture of what I might call performative Christianity. Um, that's very prevalent in these parts. So. Not that we'll get into that performative aspect so much in this convo today, but to give you and your listeners a little background as to what Tyler is about, um, before I say more on myself for just a moment, Tyler is considered to be the westernmost city of the U.S. South by Colin Woodward, writer. He said that it's very close to Dallas, but for whatever reason, the settlers of the U.S. South migrated as far west as Tyler and then kind of stopped the westward movement. And a lot of that was about plantations and movement of plantation workers. And that's a whole nother story. But that's just one of the pieces, sort of contextually, about Tyler that makes it unique, as it's definitely immersed in all things deep south. And the other is, of course, it's in the Bible Belt. So those are part of the reasons that I was happy to move away. And I did spend some time in Switzerland studying philosophy of religion in my younger years at L'Abri Fellowship, which was started by Francis Schaeffer and Edith Schaeffer in the 1960s. Francis Schaeffer wrote a lot of books, but he joined forces. You may recall with C. Everett Koop, Surgeon General in the 80s, late 70s and early 80s, and they together created those first images of the aborted fetuses that were broadcast all over the globe for people to see and then to, in a way, rile up some passions and temperaments to create more of a coalescing around what the religious right was newly forming itself to be during those times. So when I was studying there in the 90s, I was buying in very much to fundamentalist Christianity. and was sure that I wanted to be a missionary, perhaps in Central America. But in any case, from the ages of 18 to 23, I was struggling with these things, and finally at 23, I said, "There's no way I can continue to believe in such a narrow, rigid, static, myopic form of any type of so-called God." So in the years since then, I've kind of wandered all over the place, philosophically, religiously, epistemologically, and now I'm kind of full circle where I'm appreciating Christ anew, but with a different lens, a different approach, a different heart, a different mind, and a different group of folks as well. So there's a lovely group of progressive Christians, excuse me, here in Tyler, Texas, that operate under the auspices of a 501c3 called Open Table Faith. For example, Open Table Faith is bringing William Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, to Tyler next week to speak. So we're excited about that.
That's that's such a rich history, and you have so much to speak on. Were there a few things? What were the things that led up to you walking away from the faith the first time at 23? Was there a specific theology, doctrine, verse, or story? What were parts of that?
Even though, love this question, even though I was familiar with this, what I think was a Vatican II position that declared to the post-Vatican II Catholics that it's okay to believe in salvation outside of conscious awareness, outside of an individual being consciously aware of that happening, right? My understanding is that during Vatican II, they decided that salvation is still a thing. It still is only possible through Jesus, but Jesus works in mysterious ways, so we can relax our rigid, view on how that works, what it needs to look like, and so it ushered in this whole new realm of possibility for others, for all of us to consider that others might be what's commonly known as saved, right? Um, Outside of the auspices of formalized Christianity. And I mention that simply as a sort of a metaphor for my own life. It's taken me a lot of time, but I've come full circle to kind of agree with that sort of Vatican II thinking, or that piece of it rather. Um, Even though I obviously don't know much about all of that sort of Catholic undertaking in that regard, I nonetheless am very appreciative of all paths that hold a pluralistic inclusivity, such that there's no prescriptive formula that says, this is it, this is the answer. We've landed on the answer, and all you need to do is agree with, by signing or holding up your hand and agreeing out loud. So it was that sort of problem that prompted me to leave Christianity in my 20s. The problem of one right way thinking being so vocalized, so perpetuated, so enforced even that it just doesn't hold space under that big umbrella or under that big tent for anyone who views things outside of that sort of seemingly monolithic stance. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like it's just so. Well, and you go on to study philosophy in Switzerland. Um, can you clarify? I know that you said that right after you had a connection with Francis Schaeffer, was the Swiss philosophy school under Schaeffer or
It
separate?
w- it was. He was not living at the time. I was there in the early 90s. I was there twice. The first time was in the early 90s. I stayed there a year and a half. It's an English speaking school in the Swiss French part of the Alps there. I did work under the tutelage or study under the tutelage of his daughter, Priska, his eldest daughter, and and then as well his husband by the name of Greg Lowry, not the famous Greg Laurie or Lowry, but a different one with a similar name, who said some fascinating things about the image of God, which I'd love to share with you if we have time. But those philosophy studies were, I was 19 at the time, and I did not get to do a deep dive. But that was more of a broad survey of sort of apologetics, various proofs for God's existence, and kind of a philosophy of religion 101, if you will, but it was within the framework of evangelical Christianity. The study center itself was very inclusive in that anyone was allowed to be there and study there and participate, but the workers and the methodology and the mission and the message were all very much evangelical Christian.
And that's a great point to note that you saw this internationally decades ago.
Mm.
Um, and that this isn't just an isolated American
Hmm.
phenomena, that this is going on worldwide. So how does that translate to what you're seeing in Tyler, Texas now? And by the way, folks, I want to validate Tyler, Texas is beautiful.
Mm.
That whole Piney Woods, East Texas, I know that for folks listening, like when you think Texas, you think the cowboy boots and the oil, and like you're thinking of like West Texas, or you might be thinking of like the glitz and glam of Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin, like those mega cities, but which not they're not mega cities. They're on their way. They're it's like that whole triangle is becoming one conglomerate in
It
that
is.
area. But
Yes, good reminder. It is absolutely gorgeous here. For people that have
yes,
never been to Texas, they would not have a clue that it's not just dust devils and tumbleweeds. And this part of Texas especially, it's very lush, very green. We have a lot of. I feel like I'm selling Tyler at the moment, but we have a lot of amazing forests, some great waterways, creeks, rivers, lakes, and there's a lot of hiking, mountain biking, some paddling, great disc golf in Tyler. You would never know, but it's a real thing, and it's up and coming as well. And it's an interesting time to be here because there's a new medical school with the UT health system that is just being finished this year. The first cohorts have already started, and we have a downtown revitalization program that's bringing a lot of influx of uh, new populace to Tyler, if you will, and it's getting a lot of attention and a lot of buzz. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a unique time to be in Tyler, is the point.
it is. And uh, that area, when you were talking about it being the westernmost point of the South, there was like, if for the transcript, the South is going to be a capital S. Like, I know there's a
Yes,
lot of directions there, but
the
um,
South. Hmm.
so my parents are divorced, and my dad is about an hour and a half southeast of Tyler, in a town called Crockett. Population, I want to say like under 6,000. It might have been three when we were growing up. But lakes and tons of. I mean, it's the piney woods. Like you'd get on your bike and you would ride for hours in the forest, and then go to the
Hmm.
lake, go fishing, all that mountain biking, absolutely. And it's a great, awesome. I'm so thankful I had that part of my childhood. I also recognize like how deeply, when you say it's the South, it is.
Hmm.
Like that. I remember my dad, we going to a country club brunch, and the country club, like the door holder, or the foot, what are they called? The door stop, was in the shape, was in a shape of a black butler boy, but in
Mm.
like minstrel, and like just clearly like holding a tray. But I just remember, and like that was looking at my brother, and like that wasn't okay. We like, but it's the South, and it was kind of
Hmm.
like an area, a town almost like frozen in the 1960s.
Hmm.
And so when you talk about a lot of uh, you know the growth and change there, like you said, Tyler's getting a lot of attention, and then so much of that Houston growth too. I know that Crockett was getting from like the Woodlands, and kind of getting, but really, like we said, beautiful, but got some dark history to it.
Hmm.
And I'm excited to get into it because tell me what you're seeing now in your community in Tyler.
Well, one of the things I'm seeing now I'm not sure. I may end up doing a study on this later. There's a lot of crosses that have been popping up. It's been going on for years, yard crosses, that is, that say Jesus is Lord on them. I had assumed, Lee, for the past like 5 or 8 years that this was just something that was happening all over. And then more recently, I found out, no, this is an East Texas thing. There's a man, maybe a group of them, who have made thousands and thousands. I don't know how many of these crosses. If it's possible to see through the screen here, here's a photo
Oh,
of
yeah.
a stack of them outside of a local Mexican restaurant, where the sign actually says crosses are free, no more than three, please. So you are limited. But we have seen these all across town, and I got to be careful because I could harp on this, but this is not the most important thing today. It's just a momentary. It feels like the word sideshow exists because, again, to me, this feels like a very, very performative thing altogether to display a cross in one's front yard, and sometimes not just one cross, but there's actually four crosses in this person's front yard. One of them is a little baby cross in the middle that's you can barely see. It's like a family of crosses there.
Yeah,
So
I see it. Okay.
that house started off with just one, and then it was two, and now it's four, and there have been five, and we're also, last photo for now, we're also starting to see these same crosses show up in public places all across town. There's one right at a bus stop on a thoroughfare. Okay, so my concern is that we may see more and more of this sort of posturing and performative aspect of identity politics being performed through this, as of now, optional placing of a cross in your own yard. So who the heck knows where all that's going to go? But I think it's just downright fascinating. So we could talk on that for a moment if you like. But my project right now within sociology here at UT Tyler is, may I go ahead and dive into that?
Please, yeah.
Okay, very good. I was interested since there's literally, and if you want to pull up that Canva slideshow now, feel free. I was interested in, for many years, having recognized the abundance of churches in Tyler. As of now, I believe there's like 292 churches in Tyler, and that's a lot, and that's fine. And there's questions in there in terms of like the lumpers versus the splitters. Like, where are we headed? If there's 292 churches now, what's it going to be in another 20 years? You know, is that going to double at some point? So in any case, I was interested to ask senior pastors or associate pastors when they were the ones available. A couple of questions. Primarily, how does your church view inclusion and belonging through the lens of membership? So, more specifically, what are the steps required to be a member, to be included in your church? And then the second question after that first one is, how does your congregation understand belonging to the broader Christian community, or the universal church, if you will, or even Christendom, we might say, certainly beyond your own congregation or denomination. So I was able to interview 11 out of the 20 senior pastors that I invited for this first study. I was able to interview 11. I'm currently in the process of assessing that data. I've got stack of transcripts to cull through and assess and figure out what it is that I want to share, and we'll probably at this point avoid concluding anything that involves my own opining for now. And I want this to be a bit more of a data-driven study and kind of, in a way, connect some dots, connect some threads for people who might see this or read it, and just allow them to make their own conclusions.
Well, I'm really excited about your project. Do you want, while I have it pulled up, do you? I see like the check marks of all like the congregations you did interview. Do you want me to continue showing off the
Absolutely.
this?
Yeah,
Okay.
feel free. If any of that feels relevant, feel
Yeah.
free. And then
Okay.
just as a, contextually, when you're seeing these yellow orange words and quotes there, these are all simply a large set of quotes from pastors who will remain anonymous, but in some cases I can easily state their denomination without revealing who they are. Whereas in other cases, if there's only one Eastern Orthodox church in town, then I can't very well mention that a specific quote comes from that Eastern Orthodox pastor because that would, in no uncertain terms, reveal their identity.
Absolutely. Well, so I connect this all to your point about performative Christianity with the signage, right? All of these identity led. And you're talking about identity politics and membership and belonging. So, how do those fuse? And something that very, I, I'm growing concerned with is how corporate a lot of Christian membership feels. And I'm wondering if
Mm.
you um, have found any sort of, if you have come across that at all in your research, a more corporate or structure, commercial even.
Hmm. I have. One of the pieces that interests me the most in that regard is thinking about Abby Day's work. She's a sociologist out of somewhere in England. I don't recall. But in any case, Abby Day has this theory that belonging and connection happen first before belief. She posits that belief is more times than not these days a function of or an outworking of that group consciousness, if you will, or that group belonging. And so this just intrigues me to no end to consider how many of us would view churches or congregations as people who may be coming together to worship or serve or spend time together because they believe similar things. And while that may be true to a large extent, Abby Day is saying, well, the opposite is actually true. That they're coming together for connectivity and community and whatnot, and then therein and thereby their beliefs may coalesce and form. And I haven't gotten into the fullness of that book just yet, but that does intrigue me, and we do see a lot of performative Christianity here in a variety of ways. I'm not sure if I touched directly on your corporate question.
No, that's okay. But your Abby Day comment reminded me a few summers ago I was in Sweden, and they've been secular since I want to say 1954,
Mm,
and but they still practice a sort of cultural Christianity. Like there's still that Protestant Lutheran that I noticed while there. Like there's still Christmas is what I'm trying to say, or like they'll still say Merry Christmas, or like if it needs to come to talk about God, like they'll use like the Christian vernacular to at least try to
mm,
explain the abstract. I mean, not so much the dogma or doctrine, but like you still see the influence there. And one of the things I stumbled upon when I was researching a bit more about the Swedish secularism was how they understand belonging, and similar to what you just said, belonging before believing,
mm,
like or belonging without like this sort of like you're here because we're all a part of it and we're gonna make it work, and just sort of whatever you believe is kind of your your bag, but
Mm.
like come together in the public square to find some common ground.
That's awesome. I'd
So,
love to hear more or read more about that at some point.
yeah, well, um, tell me more about some of the themes or patterns that you're kind of finding in your research.
hmm One of the themes that really interests me, and if you want to look into one or two of those quotes, we could easily find one. Trying to think which one it might be, or we can leave that be. Either way is fine. But one of the patterns that I think is fascinating to me is how many of these pastors seem to have a way of characterizing their own congregation that may not be that accurate from outside of it. For example, there's a very, what I would call conservative Church of Christ congregation here in Tyler that whose pastor said that some people don't come or won't come to our church because we're far too progressive. And I need to follow up with this pastor via email, and if I choose to at this point, because I'm kind of wrapping up the research and trying to, in the next couple of weeks, complete the summary and findings. But in any case, at some point, it would be nice to follow up and say, what did you mean by that? There were several other versions of that where a pastor would posture themselves or their congregation in a way that made me wonder how connected to like a truly accurate view of the reality of the situation is the expression of the pastor compared to how the general populace might view that congregation. But other than that, what I'm really interested in most in this study, Lee, is looking at the scope of inclusion that each congregation has created and then maintains through three different lenses. So, first and foremost, membership. What does it take to be a member? What are the steps? Is there a doctrinal statement or a statement of faith? How long is it? The second lens is communion. Who's allowed? Who's invited to participate in communion? And then the third lens is engagement with other congregations and other denoms, right? How much, if any, engagement with other denominations and churches does your own church have, or does it want to have? So these are the sort of the three lenses through which I'm looking at scopes of inclusion. And one main takeaway that I'm sensing is that I'm not sure about this. I'm thinking about this right now, right? So I'll use the words "it seems" because that's just what this seems like. It seems to me that, and this may be relatively obvious, so my apologies if so, but I think there's a lot of fodder for deeper considerations in this relatively obvious thing that I'm about to say. But it seems that the shorter the statement of faith or doctrinal statement, the broader the scope of inclusion.
Yeah.
I love that you laugh. um, I think I because I think it's very interesting and please go ahead.
Well, the two slides I was just looking at, one was the Nicene Creed bit, and I'll kind of touch on that in a second. But also just laughing because I have both an Episcopalian or Anglican background and also Disciples of Christ, and
Mm,
Disciples of Christ is a creedless denomination,
hmm
and I laugh because yes, it Disciples of Christ is very inclusive, but it is
hmm
so inclusive that me and Ronald Reagan claim the same denomination. And I'm
Reagan
like,
was
how?
the Disciples of Christ?
Yeah, big deal on
Wow.
it. There's a school in Illinois, I want to say, that has like a Disciples of Christ. Is it Emmett, something? It starts, but like, oh, of course I can't think about it when it's being recorded. It'll come to me in like an hour, folks. Sorry, but but yeah. I also there's John Stamos was Disciples of Christ. I took a polity class on Disciples of Christ last summer. That's how I'm like, oh, I can tell you this real quick.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a definitely, there's something to it. Like, on one hand, yes, absolutely inclusive, but then what does it mean? Like, like I don't think, like, I speak out against Ronald Reagan all the time. So like it's like there's I what it means to be a Christian is a great question. Is it and what does it mean to belong and be a member, and how come some Christians, I mean, it's even like when they say, like, you know, when JD Vance was like, "We are a Christian nation," I was like, "Yeah, but which kind of Christian? Like, are we
How many
Method?"
millions, how many millions of people heard that and interpreted it in a million different ways?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, and who gets to have the monopoly on Christianity, and
Well,
but
that's
go
actually
ahead.
one of the fascinating pieces that drives my whole curiosity and much of the work that I'm doing and then also hope to do is I'm considering graduate studies after this December. So the whole notion of differing views of everything. And I'm seeing this in the study as well. There's an old joke between one pastor mentioned there's an old joke between Baptists and Church of Christ, both pointing their finger at each other saying you're not going to be in heaven. And that for the most part, it's a historical joke that is just kind of funny, haha, that people don't still believe. But he said, but actually, some still do. And I think we all know that that is relatively common for any number of denominations or individuals across the spectrum to hold a view that says our body is the one that's orthodox or that's right or that has it figured out. And, you know, everyone else, I'm sorry, but you're going to hell. And that's just tragic to me. So I'm glad Kirk Cameron came out of the closet as someone who does not believe in eternal conscious torment. At least that's what I think he has said. And, you know, like Rob Bell and many others, and maybe others will follow suit and have a more relaxed and kind view of this God that is said to be all loving and all powerful. So I guess we'll see as time unfolds. But as far as this study goes, it's one of the things that definitely drives my curiosity. This whole array, this cornucopia of beliefs and positions of belief that posture themselves again and again in contrast to others, defining our own views or defining one's own views often merely by contrast to the other church that we don't agree with. But and the last thing I'll say for this brief moment here is just that this study that I'm doing is in no way meant to be a hit piece. I I am aiming to honor the churches that exist in Tyler in a way that helps people through a sociological lens understand more about who they are, what they are, how they function in terms of inclusion on those three pieces, and perhaps allow some of the general public to have a more informed view of that very array of differences or of dare I say diversity.
That was such a well worded response.
Well, thank
And
you.
then it's exactly what it is. And one of the quotes on here, it says, "I want to be one church. I want to be ecumenical and even interfaith, but yet try and find grounds on which we can all work together as Christians is kind of tricky business."
Yeah.
So this sounds like, and then I did find the other one that said that, you know, they wouldn't fellowship with us because we're way too progressive for them.
Mm.
So these two contrasts
Hmm.
of of like you said, identity politics, and also I think about how this is all so kind of new. I don't want to say new, but sort of. But like after, the Holy Roman or Holy Catholic Empire, um, where the state mandated the religion, this idea of like the free market of believers and competing for believers, and then having this whole idea of marketing to it. I think it all kind of leads into that same conversation of what you're saying, this performative Christianity, um, but also putting membership probably before the belonging, or
Mm.
so. But it's
Mhm.
just this growing and massing in numbers, and it almost kind of like what I said earlier, just like that corporate or even like capitalist Christianity, like grow, grow, grow. Um, and I feel like I'm trailing off now, so sorry, but that's kind
No
of what
worries.
made me think of it.
Yeah. And there's so many things that are connected to this. There's like it can get real easy to sort of tangentiate, if you will, and then realize I've gotten off topic. I don't mean in the conversation, but as much, more so like in the research, because I'm learning a lot about these pastors and about these churches that's just not related to the scope of this first study, at least. Maybe there will be a second one, who knows? But, for example, identity politics, although I speak about it or mention it with you today, it's not really something I'm looking at in this research. Um, May I ask you a question about Christian nationalism as far as this study
For
goes?
sure. Yeah.
So, if Lee, if there's a second study, or a relook, if you will, at some of this data, whether it's new data or same data, either way, if I was going to ask, well, first off, I'd love to hear if you have any suggestions on questions, now or later, about questions of inclusion, as I've already expressed the current scope of the study. So I'm keen on that if you have anything. But regarding Christian nationalism, if I was going to ask these pastors, let's say I could interview, with the help of others, 75 churches this fall, how might I articulate a question to them along the lines of, what is your church's view, and response to Christian nationalism, in a way that is not in any way cornering them, or otherwise, trying to be a gotcha moment. Any ideas on how that could be articulated?
Yeah. You could start with, just instead of asking, Christian nationalism outright, you could ask how they feel about a lot of the Christian rhetoric that White House or Pentagon officials
Mm.
use. Like,
Hmm.
uh, and that might actually get you more to the heart of what you're asking anyway. Of like, how do you feel about, so much Christian rhetoric being
Hmm.
employed for very violent geopolitical means, and economic, and or whatever. But
That's right.
uh, so kind of, yeah, almost. I know that sounds like it's like go even deeper, get more specific, but it's kind of like, yeah, just because the answers are um, a bit all over the place. You
Yeah.
have people that, I mean, a month ago, none of us wanted a war, and now there is a substantial number of Americans who are all the way in. Like, so lots of rhetoric, lots of things
Mm.
happen in response. So it's probably always just best to ask what they feel about the leadership in the
Hmm.
Christian language.
I
The
like it.
other thing, um, in terms of like belonging and scope, you touched on that. There's a book somewhere by Pamela Cooper White who talks about the psychology of Christian nationalism, and she has a whole
Mm.
chapter on the recruitment aspect. And like, I actually like, I don't see an issue like the recruitment process itself that she was talking about, like that sort of free market of believers that I mentioned. The recruitment's not necessarily a problem. In fact, I think a lot of progressive mainline churches could adopt some of their models and some of their
Hmm.
Again, it's the theology of once you get in to the community, but that's worth looking into,
Hmm.
or a resource for your study, the psychology of Christian nationalism. Another one is Baptizing America by
Mm.
Brian Kaler, and it talks about how the Protestant church played a role um, in what it meant to be a Christian, and kind of like the 60s, and just sort of the Yale Harvard intellectual mainline Protestant church. What was their role in all of this? Because it's easy to be like, the evangelicals just came out of nowhere, and it's like, no, actually, this is all a process.
Hmm.
Um, and we're a bit more entangled with one another than I think we'd like to admit.
Right.
um, did I answer your question though?
I think so. No, I know so. Definitely. Thank you for that. That's super helpful. And it's a great time to be talking about Christian nationalism, isn't it? Just in general, but also since the Summit for Religious Freedom is coming up in 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in DC. I wish I could be there in person, but I will most certainly be participating remotely. That's that the Americans United is putting on. So.
Well, and tell me, the Texas Board of Education, I think it's Ken Paxton. Who else? There's a few. David Barnes is another one. I'd be really interested in talking with you again about some of these Texas leaders that are really leaning into this Christian rhetoric. And I know
Mhm.
Dallas Fort Worth, North Texas, is a hotbed. A lot of big mega churches there, so
Mhm.
there's so much more for us to talk about, and I do hope you'll come back and that you enjoyed today's talk. It went by
Yes,
so quickly.
I did. It was very quick. And Lee, before we part, I have to say happy birthday to you. I'm a few days late. Um, I hope you had a great one. And seeing this reel just a day or two ago with the fourth grade class writing out all of their cards to you, that was just so sweet and delightful. Those look like magnificent cards. So I hope it's been a good week for you.
It has. That's so kind. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, it was, and it's a good reminder, when thinking about history, politics, community, all of this, the heavy stuff, that like just reminding kids to go outside and play and to enjoy our public lands,
Yeah.
like that. It's just simple. That's the agenda I have for that book. I'm like, yeah, go see your national parks because they're cool, and here's what you can do. And my dog, who's behind me, narrates it, so to have these kids respond, of just be like, yeah, it is cool to want to see the outdoors. I'm like, yeah, you got it. Like, you get it from Tyler.
Yes.
Like, so
Very much so. The simplicity and the sacred simplicity that's available to us through all things nature. Yes, beautiful.
yes, it is. It's just simple. So, um, well, before we wrap up, where your research, I know you said you're in the middle of it. When do you think we'll be able to read it or learn more about it?
Hopefully this summer.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
maybe as early as May. Just kind of it's going to be May or June, ideally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Please come back and share what you found, and we'll keep going. And I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything else before we wrap up you
Gosh,
want to say to the audience?
it feels like there's a dozen questions or things that I wanted to ask you or touch on. So I'll just ask one real quick.
Yeah.
Since you're working on Christian nationalism through the U.S. Armed Forces chaplaincy, am I correct? I just want to ask one sort of specific question. Are there many interfaith chaplains in the U.S. Armed Forces, or are there some?
Yeah, so there were a ton. That's what I meant by that Baptizing America that talks about the Protestant main line. So for like World War II through like probably like 90s, it was very much like ecumenical. In
Mm,
fact, you could argue that, and I do argue that the U.S. military tends to precede American society in terms of diversity because it
mm,
needs it, because it just needs bodies.
mm,
And so early on, it was recognizing Catholic and Jewish chaplains before a lot of mainstream society was.
Mm.
Um,
How cool.
so, or, it was kind of warming up to that idea. You do see since the 90s this, Mark Driscoll and the focus on the family. You see that kind of coming off the Reagan years, and then 9/11 bolstered it. And now there's quite a number of evangelical, I mean, it is overwhelmingly and overrepresented by predominantly Southern Baptist or like denominations, because so many of
Wow.
them also just fall under non-denominational now. So so
Hmm.
it's Southern Baptist is the main one, and now there's a ton of non-denominational, and what that has looked like is a lot more. And that was never like even George Washington. That was never he was not interested in a chaplain corps because he was worried about salvation and souls. He wanted it was a morality thing. Like he wanted
Mm.
the hope, he wanted morals, he wanted a clergy moral guidance in the room to stop the drinking and the
Mm.
prostitution and the gambling and keep it somewhat civil. There was a morality aspect to it. But and he even like he did Protestants in the first round, and then like 3 months later brought in a Unitarian Universalist to like say like this is not a Protestant chaplain corps, this, or this specific, this is, we're just here to make sure that our men are okay. And so they're really, like I said, very ecumenical historically. Not necessarily friendly with,
Mm.
um, you know, Muslim countries as of late, but again, that's a post 1948 kind of state of Israel relationship, this Judeo-Christian ally, geopolitical allegiance. Because
Hmm.
so I don't know if
Awesome.
that was too much of the question or to answer you too much, but yeah, it is really interesting how, and in fact, the Chaplain Corps drew a lot of people who liked interfaith because it was a multi-faith workforce.
Mm.
Like it is the one place that you knew that you had to be cool with everybody and like navigate this, and you actually found some sort of like you liked, like there was an aspect to that that drew you. And we've seen in the last like decade or two of people going into the chaplain corps being upset about that aspect of being like, well, I don't want to have to minister to people who don't, you know, agree with me, or don't like, I don't like their lifestyle, or think it's
Yeah.
um and so that's a different interesting turn, because now we have chaplains worrying about themselves and how they feel and what they're comfortable and their rights, and it's very like, you're the giver, you're the caregiver, the one with religious authority and a healing prophetic. It's just it's changed a lot.
Yes. Wow, that's a perfect answer. Thank you for allowing me a moment to
Yeah,
ask a question as well. And then
yeah.
is it safe to say I can read more about some of these things in your thesis when that comes out?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I have some time if you have another question. I don't mean to like cut you off, but we, um, I'll definitely be releasing, and I'm starting to get more active on Substack, um, and trying to like promote my research in my book and like release it without violating any certain, future copyright issues or something. But uh, my goodness, is there just so much to, it's like everyone had to learn American history right now real quick and get all caught up is what it kind of
Mm-hmm.
feels like.
Very much so. Well, I could definitely ask more questions. I know we don't have endless time, so maybe I'll just pick one that jumps out at me here. Oh, but before I ask it, when can we expect your thesis completion?
That's a great, the thesis is already done. I just haven't
Oh,
released it so
I
that it
see.
doesn't violate like copyright with my book. The
Gotcha.
book, I am moving, I am like midway through, and I'm putting out book proposals now to
Mm.
agents, and
Mm.
starting to be like, so can we get this signed so I can release the thesis or release some version of it? But
Hmm.
I want to And that's what sucks, copyright and all those things. And then also the other thing that I was bummed about, because I was like, oh, maybe I will share it with some folks. It was like, if it gets into AI somehow and like that distorts copyright, and I was like, I okay, well, fine then I'll just keep talking about it via podcast. And
Like if
so
anyone were to happen to upload it into AI, then that would destroy the agreement,
that's it.
or
Somewhat, I don't, just because copyright and AI right now is just, there's no, it's the Wild West. And so there, it gets better to just do it by piecemeal, or do it by or do it by podcast, like do it
Mm.
just and I don't know. I mean, and because then my question is like, well, then how deep does this go? I mean, does like Google Docs, does that how what who has who owns what anymore as a human
Mm.
being, like, that has to use all these things? uh, so yeah, but anyway, please ask your question.
Okay.
I'm just
Well,
chatting.
thank you for that. Oh gosh, I've got so many, and they're all competing to be asked. Let's see. Um, well, here's one I think I'll go with. I'm a little surprised there's not been a global solidarity movement that has really taken roots and coalesced, more and more humans globally. I think we're seeing a lot of more regional solidarity movements here and there. Certainly, No Kings should be mentioned. Yeah, Me Too kind of, in a way, may have set the stage for some of what we're seeing with No Kings. But it seems like we're poised, not maybe this year or in the next several years, who knows? It seems like we're poised for the very real and definite need for a global solidarity movement to actualize itself. And I just wonder if you have any sort of hunches or ideas on what sort of um, tone or type of larger solidarity movement could be the thing that unites humans worldwide. It seems like we're just all very, very fragmented right now, and there's just an absolute need for coming together.
Yeah, a global solidarity movement sounds beautiful when it is by, like, if we were to do that now and by choice, it could be beautiful, it could be well organized, and there could be some good things that come from it. My
Mm.
fear is that people don't typically get to that level of solidarity until things are really bad
Mm.
economically.
So maybe that's
uh,
what's happening right now. It's just
yeah.
the stage is being set, if you will, so that we can respond to it.
and i'm and I'm I because, and like you said, everyone's very fragmented, and I've seen that online of leftists like sort of rooting for this AI recession, depression, whatever is going to come from it. Like, they want
Hmm.
there, it's an accelerationist of like how bad this capitalist late stage stuff is, and AI, authoritarian, the crypto, the all the corruption that we're seeing. There's this sense of cheering it on so that things can be bad enough so that people can have a revolution. And
Hmm.
uh, that is really scary to think,
Hmm.
like those things should not be taken lightly about how many people die and how bad things get. And I'm not here to go down the political science of what that looks like, but that is a concern of, like, solidarity typically comes from desperation. And
Hmm.
but that also, it leads to a lot of ideas, and I
Hmm.
think it does kind of, I think that there is a really interesting relationship between secularism and it creating, or not even creating, but them both being in this dynamic of a religious society and a secular society, and they keep causing the other. Like, enough
Mm.
religion will eventually lead to something like the American Revolution, where they're like, no, no more kings, no more church and state. And now you go secular for 250 years, and they decide that America's so great, we need to redo the Constitution, which it doesn't make sense to me, but like,
Mm,
um, we need to redo the Constitution in order to have more Christian laws and influence, is what I'm saying. So it's, um, what else could I say about solidarity? But that's also like, I mean, you and I are doing that. We are like
mm,
making those connections and
for
sharing
sure.
research and doing that before we get to that point and saying like, hey, you're seeing these patterns. Like those things about crosses in East Texas don't surprise me at all. Um, but it is interesting to hear you say, oh, I thought this was happening everywhere and it's actually just a regional thing. Because I don't see it, but we'll have our own. It'll maybe it won't be a wooden cross that says Jesus is Lord, but like for a long time it was the MAGA flag or the Trump flag or whatever I saw.
Hmm.
But I think that's broken a lot of hearts, a lot for his voters. And I've seen them take down the flag and just put up the cross. Um, I don't know. I um,
It's a big
but
question.
it's too big of a question. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And it was also not just big, but it was a field, very a field of what we were talking about. So thanks for engaging on that. I do appreciate it. I will say, Lee, if you get to a point where you might need a proofreader, I'm a darn good proofreader. If you ever want to try someone out, send me a chapter or a page. I've got a knack for some of that. So I'm excited for you and what's
I I
coming with your book.
I might take you up on it because I mean that's the half of it of just like does this even read like does this sound okay? But so yeah, thank you and you have so much experience and theologically, philosophically, and just you know worldly. So thank you for sharing that with the audience today. Thank you for asking some questions. You're more than welcome to send those questions over too. And I can email them back to you or whatever that looks like if you'd like that for your research. Um,
Which
but
questions?
just if you had any other questions, please
Ah,
send them my way, and
okay.
I'd be happy
Thank
to
you.
answer any, and we'll go from there. Because
That'd be
uh,
great.
I didn't even think about like I liked how you worded it, the global solidarity, and like yeah,
Mm,
we do need it, and we are working to. We can all feel it. Like I can feel it, and just um,
yes. And if I may just name the one thing that I think is needed is that it's a cross faith secular bridge. Like we need to get rid of that chasm and even talking about it and thinking about it. It's time. I think we need an interfaith movement that greatly and grandly expands the definition of faith to include previous notions previously thought of as non-faith or groups rather, if that made any sense.
I think that's yes, that's reminding me of also kind of gets in some process theology if you have looked into
Mm,
process theology or quantum theology and um, there's some well, I'll think of some resources later but um, yeah there this ability to having to find some way for faith in secular society because again you have a very Christian conservative idea of what society should look like, and then for if you go on the opposite side of the spectrum, on the far left, they'll start to hate religion. Like there's this like
that's
very
right.
much this animosity towards it, and I don't like that
Yeah,
either. And it's what
that's right.
deters a lot of people
Hmm.
from secularism. Is just like, why are you so condescending to me about the faith? That's
Hmm. So true.
and and also so we'll have to see what that looks like. But the
Yes.
good news is, I don't know if this is good, but like when we look at historical patterns, like this is not the first time we've had to answer some of these questions for
Hmm.
ourselves. Like there
Hmm.
are waves of this. They typically come on the heels of a new technology. We saw this in industrial revolution, printing press, weapon. We can also tie it to how technology and the markets influence these waves of identity too because
Hmm.
of people having to adjust to change and oh there's been a change and who are we? And I don't, and just this sort of tribalism that happens, but the world will keep spinning. It might get scary for a minute there, a little rocky, but as a society, we'll just keep talking and getting through it somehow. Like, and
Yes.
that's the hope of Christ. Like that's it. That's all I have. I don't know how, but we will, because we already have before.
That's right.
So
Thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and conversation and sharing. Just your time. I very much appreciate it.
yeah, no, back at you. This was awesome. I do need to wrap up this podcast, and then you and I can talk. But well, Paul, you have been a fantastic guest. Again, this is from Tyler, Texas, East Texas, Piney Woods. A little bit different perspective than what we've had in the last couple of weeks. I know we tend to jump around the country talking to folks about this. And thank you for your research and doing what you can, your boots on the ground, your community, being where your hands are. That is the work. That's doing the work and doing the justice. So folks, let me know what you thought of this conversation. Please drop it in the comments. This has been really rich, and if you have any suggestions or people or anything that I feel could benefit other listeners or readers, make sure to drop that in the comments too, any resources. But this has been another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and until next time, see ya. All right.